Yep, you read the title right. This video is about exactly what the title says. The thumbnail wasn't clickbait. I am going to talk about the 2012 Disney Channel original movie, Radio Rebel, and I'm going to make the case that it is it's a metaphor for the police state. Yeah, so I feel like there isn't a lot of Radio Rebel inspired content online at the moment, and a lot of what is seems to just be more talking about the movie and how it's kind of cringy, which is fine, but I think that the movie offers a little bit more than that, and I want to delve into that. This is actually the first part of a larger video series I hope to do on this channel, where I seek deeper meaning in various Disney Channel original movies, which is a genre of films that I think is really ripe for overly serious leftist video analysis.
I have an app that controls voice!
America is a nation of immigrants, Kyle. Everybody's ancestors came from another country.
So buckle up, everybody, because this is going to be a weird ride. So Radio Rebel is the story of a high school student named Tara, played by Debbie Ryan, who is secretly running an underground subversive podcast from her bedroom while also going through the everyday trials of high school life, or at least the sterilized Disney Channel version of high school life. Overall, this is a pretty standard setup for this genre of film, and I do want to say right off the bat that for the most part, this is a very by the numbers movie. I mean, there's a stock love interest character, a stock queen bee villain character, a stock quirky best friend. I am going to give a plot summary, but I'm really only going to be focusing on the parts that are relevant for this analysis. The less time is spent on detailing the high school drama elements, the better. The movie begins with Radio Rebel via voiceover giving a lecture about how cliques are bad and they only serve to artificially divide the student body, which she believes should be more unified. We are then introduced to Tara, IRL, and her quirky best friend, as well as these two, who are awful. They're supposed to be comedic relief, but they're not funny, and also you could remove them from the story without changing literally anything about the plot at all, and they just kind of distract from scenes with characters that actually matter, with like lame asides that are honestly kind of painful to watch. It's just like, why are they even there? Since they aren't relevant to the plot or themes of the movie, I will not be bringing them up in this discussion. I just kind of wanted to bring them up this once so that I could talk about how much I loathe them. So once we're introduced to these characters, we meet the villain, who is not named Valerie, but who I am going to call Valerie for this entire video. She has a generic evil conversation with her sidekick, and then they run into the stock love interest character, who I will henceforth be referring to as Great Value Noah Centineo. And basically his entire purpose in the movie is to be like conflicted, where he's like, do I want popularity and to date Valerie and to be a rock star like my tool best friend, or do I want to not do that? And you will never guess which one he picks. It's shocking. So then Tara and her best friend run into Valerie, and her best friend tries to sell Valerie on the idea that they should abolish cliques, and Valerie is not having it, and she calls the principal. And then this very interesting exchange happens.
Please don't stand so close to us. You and I aren't any different. Like Radio Rebel said.
No words. You don't think we're different? Watch and learn.
That's all we know.
Stacy. Is everything all right over here?
Actually, no. Audrey was trying to get me to listen to some podcasting class. Of course, I said no.
What? No, I mean, I never.
You know that there's an anti-distraction policy. Let me see your back.
But I wasn't even listening to it.
Oh, and now you can't, can you? You too, young lady. Hand it over. Thank you for bringing this to my attention.
Valerie.
Get it now?
So, here we have a popular student weaponizing the principal against the unpopular students. In other words, we have a privileged upper class weaponizing an absolute authority against a vulnerable underclass with no ability to resist. Interesting. Now, Radio Rebel's podcast isn't just about ending cliques. It's also about calling out the principal's unfair treatment of the student body. And as the principal sees this movement gaining popularity, she bans any and all Radio Rebel contraband from the school grounds, essentially promising punishment to anyone caught listening to Radio Rebel or spreading Radio Rebel ideology. An authoritarian group passing legislation to criminalize dissident ideologies that they perceive as a threat? Put a pin in that one, folks. At some point during this rise in popularity, Tara's stepfather discovers his daughter's secret hobby and offers her a chance to join the radio station that he runs and become an official radio host. It's clear from his pitch that he sees this as a lucrative opportunity to generate more interest in his radio station and give it a cool, hip image with the kids. So what we essentially have here is a wealthy capitalist exploiting the aesthetics of revolutionary ideology in order to sell products. Now, throughout all of this, Valerie has been becoming increasingly obsessed with discovering the secret identity of Radio Rebel. She also has spent her time kissing up to the principal by stroking her ego and encouraging her in her increasingly authoritarian tendencies. Now, this kind of feels like a metaphor to me, like maybe for like a, I don't know, like a figure of speech for, like maybe something that references like using your tongue to like spread saliva over some kind of heavy durable footwear. What is the phrase? Someone will probably point it out in the comments. As the students continue to join together in various acts of civil disobedience, the principal uses her total authority to cancel the prom, sparking outrage amongst the student body.
I'm canceling the prom.
What?
For everyone.
She can't do this!
Now one would think that this outrage would lead to more solidarity. However, Valerie and the other populars use their socialist influence to artificially redirect the rage away from the principal who canceled the prom and onto Radio Rebel. Now, in the real world, communal punishments are a war crime, but we're still talking about Radio Rebel right now, so we'll get back to that. The film ultimately culminates in Radio Rebel throwing an alternative prom, which she calls the Morp because, you know, get it? Which everyone in school attends. Radio Rebel is crowned Morp Queen, but as this happens, the principal appears from behind the curtain and expels Tara from school. However, as this happens, everyone in attendance, including Valerie, unites in a final act of defiance and declare themselves to be Radio Rebel. The principal leaves in a huff, unable to expel everyone, finally defeated by the power of the International Proletariat Revolution. I mean, a united student body. So, you probably noticed some things. This movie is a very explicit metaphor for the police state. During my rewatch, I was genuinely surprised by how much it commits to that. And to be clear, I don't think that this is necessarily intentional, only that at every turn, the movie seemingly goes out of its way to make sure the audience knows who is who in this elaborate metaphor that it's constructed. So, since we're on the subject of the who's who of this metaphor, I think it would probably be a good idea to examine the character of the principal, who is the metaphoric representative of the police state itself. The principal is shown to be unnecessarily aggressive, domineering, even violent in some cases.
Better students. And you.
She has a smug sense of superiority over her students, and she takes great pleasure in gleefully enforcing her arbitrary and oftentimes unfair rules. We see her confiscate student belongings, and there isn't actually any indication within the film that they ever get these back. Like, she just has them now. She's just taken like their MP3 player or whatever the kids were using in 2012. They just don't get it back. Like, it's just hers now. Like, this principal just walks up to students who are standing in the hallway in between classes, takes their stuff, doesn't give it back, and her only excuse for this behavior is a vague allusion to her anti-distraction policy, which, like, okay, sure. However, for this analysis, perhaps the most important aspect of the principal is that, as far as the movie shows us, she is completely unsupervised. There is no school board. There is no governing body. She has absolute rule, and she answers to no one but herself. Anyone who questions her absolute authority risks punishment, and she takes something even as benign as a lunchtime dance party as a personal affront to her power. Which brings us to the uncomfortable part of this review. I kind of have to talk about the real world now. I know, I know, but I gotta. So here's the thing. Police in America have pretty much no supervision, and they really like that setup. Recently, after pushing a 75-year-old man onto concrete, cracking open his skull and causing him to bleed from the ears, the police falsely reported that he had tripped. If this hadn't been caught on video camera by a bystander, there would be no accountability for the officers that perpetrated this. By the way, after those officers were punished, 56 of their colleagues resigned out of solidarity with them. Not with the old man whose skull got cracked, with the people who got fired for doing that. Don't worry, you guys, though. It's just a few bad apples. It's fine. Now, it seems like body cameras might be a possible solution to this problem. But unfortunately, body cameras do very little for several reasons. The first is that there is actually no federal law keeping police from just turning it off. Like they can just turn off the body cameras if they want to. So, I mean, that's kind of bad. But also, there's nothing keeping the footage from those body cameras from going not so mysteriously missing when it happens to be incriminating. The city of Tucson has recently attempted to pass legislation that makes it illegal to film police officers. This is such a blatant transgression of the First Amendment that if it does go through, it will make police officers completely free from any kind of community accountability. Now, at this point, both in the video and within the cursed timeline that we are confined to, it should be pretty obvious that America has, at the very least, a police problem, and at the very most, has descended into an authoritarian police state. As cops have continued to escalate violence against peaceful protesters across the nation, the president has essentially attempted to force state governors to accept aid from the military to prevent the violence, which seems like sending in the military to end violence would be kind of an oxymoron, but what do I know? I mean, it kind of a little bit feels like the goal isn't to stop violence at all, and is actually to crush dissent and secure totalitarian control. Oh, look! It's the pin from earlier. It's back, you guys. It's back. The criminalization of dissident ideologies is a core aspect of totalitarian regimes and the police state, and it's one that has been becoming increasingly evident in recent times. And I want to be clear that declaring Antifa a terrorist organization is declaring anti-fascism to be a terrorist ideology. Because here's the thing, Antifa isn't an organization. It doesn't have leaders. It doesn't have members. They don't hold Antifa rallies. Antifa is just the ideology of being against fascism and wanting to combat it however possible. And it kind of seems like the only people who would be anti-fascism would be, you know, fascists. Over the past week or so, an insane number of people have been radicalized as they witness the senseless acts of police brutality occurring against peaceful protesters throughout the nation, and internationally, in fact. Not only has there been a massive shift in favor of defunding and ultimately disbanding the police, but the city of Minneapolis has recently, at the time of filming this video at least, declared that it will abolish its entire police department. This is a decision made by the city council, and it is non-vetoable. Now, this unprecedented action has led to a lot of people who agree that the police as an organization are corrupt and that there needs to be massive systemic change, but who are wondering exactly what safety and law enforcement would look like in a world without police, which is a very fair thing to be wondering, because police are very ingrained into the very concept of civilization, as modern Americans understand it at least. Now, that is a question I'm not going to be answering in this video, because this video is about Radio Rebel. So instead, I would recommend that you check out this fantastic stream on the YouTube channel for Harriet, in which they discuss kind of what a post-police society would look like if we were to abolish police on a national and international scale. Suffice it to say here that abolishing police is not a particularly new idea. In fact, it's been around about as long as police have, and there are decades, centuries even, of scholarship and activism towards the direction of police, prison, abolition. So if Radio Rebel is an elaborate metaphor for a police state, I think it's important to ask the question of what does it have to teach us about the police state? You know, metaphors usually are saying something. So I think there are three main takeaways. Number one is that the police state will always try to divide the people against each other, and that we need to unite in solidarity if we're going to make substantive change. The powers that be will always try to get us to blame the protesters for their own brutalization, to say that they somehow brought it on themselves. Don't buy it. Don't let them divide us, because it only gives them more power. Number two is that the importance of direct action cannot be overstated. More has been accomplished in these last few weeks of protest than in years of elections, and you can't simply vote out a problem if you're facing an authoritarian system that is corrupt at its core. And number three is to be yourself. I mean, it is a Disney Channel movie.